Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Dr. Karachi and in this video lecture I'm going to talk about Module 2, Planning and Scoping for Penetration Testing. Now, few concepts I'm going to cover, like governance, risk, and compliance briefly. I'm going to discuss in more details the scope and requirements. And I'm going to talk, just introduce to you MITRE ATT&CK Framework, which is, I think this is very important framework that you need to become familiar with. Now, before we proceed, I think it's a good idea to go over a few key terms here. The first one is governance. What does it mean? It means that it ensures that organizational activities and decisions are aligned with the business goals, fostering strategic directions and oversight. Now, risk refers to the potential loss of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information, data, or system, as well as the potential harm that such loss may cause to the organization. And finally, we talk about compliance here. Okay, it means that the organization are required to adhere to established policies, regulation relevant to their business operations. Okay, so regulatory compliance, this is very important for any organization. I think we need to cover, a few things about it here. Now, regulatory compliance, okay, see, pen testing are often conducted to fulfill regulatory compliance obligation, ensuring that organization meets the necessary security requirements defined by laws, regulations, or industry standard. Now, these tests help organizations demonstrate their commitment to protecting sensitive data, reducing risk, and adhering to mandate security practices. Now, one of the compliance involves rules, regulations, and standard. Yeah, which means that these stuff required by organization to follow, to operate legally and ethically within its industry. Now, these requirements are typically designed to protect consumers, stakeholders, and the organization itself from data breaches, fraud, and other security issues. Now, when we talk about compliance standard here, now there are different standards that I'm going to talk about it later on. But however, I'll just give you like a brief idea. Now, compliance standards on penetration testing can vary depending on industry. Like some regulation like PCI DSS provide detailed requirements for testing, scoping, frequency, and reporting, while others may offer only just the minimal direction, leaving organization to determine the depth and the focus of their security assessment. Now, the best practices in technical, operational, and policy areas also play a role in shaping the need for and the scope of penetration tests. Like, for example, strong governance frameworks, of course, effective risk management practices, and very important, robust security policy may influence how tests are designed and executed to ensure a comprehensive assessment of the organization security situation here. Now, let's take, for example, one of the important compliances, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS. Now, this is widely recognized set of security standards designed to ensure that all organizations that handle credit card information maintain a secure environment. If you want to build up your e-commerce website, you have to comply with the PCI in order to, in order to accept like credit card payment, like Visa, MasterCard, and others. So the PCI DSS was established to protect cardholder data and reduce the risk of fraud, theft, and breaches associated with payment card transaction. Now, excuse me. Now, The PCI DSS applies to all entities involved in payment that, card processing, like the merchants, processors, acquirers, insurers, issuers, service providers. All of these are required to follow the standard here. Now, if you look at it here, these are the requirements categories that you need to look at it. I strongly recommend that to download the document related to PCI DSS and read about it. But I'm just going to give you just a brief idea about each one of those items here. The first one here: build and maintain a secure network and system. Like for example, install and maintain a firewall configuration to protect cardholder data. Avoid using vendor supplied default settings for system password security. These are just the simple examples here. Protect card holder data, which means like protect, the data of the card holder. Make sure that you encrypt transmission of card holder data across open public network. Maintain a vulnerability management program. Means that you need to make sure that you update antivirus software. You need to develop and maintain secure system and application. Implement strong access control measures, like restrict access to cardholder data to only those who need it. Assign a unique ID to each person with access. Restrict physical access to cardholder data. And of course, regularly monitor and test networks, which means you need to track and monitor all access to networks and resources and cardholder data, Maintain an information security policy. Of course, you need to have a security policy in place and being updated, regularly. Okay, so you could see that how important is, talking about real, PCI DSS, because I'm sure you're familiar with some of these, by the way. Like for example, like Target Corporation, they lost 40 million credit card numbers in 2013, costing over 220 million in legal fees and settlements. Adobe, the same thing. Equifax, these are very well known, and that's this one was big disaster. They suffered a breach in 2017 involving 143 million people in three countries. Settlement over $425 million. Now, there's other important compliance standards that belong to the United States. We cannot cover each one of them, that's for sure. You got the HIPAA, which governs the security and privacy of sensitive health information. GLBA, control financial institution handling sensitive data. SOX protects investors from fraudulent practices. FIPS, that's federal security requirements for data encryption for U.S. government and contractors, and the ISO, which is the standard and the best practices on information security. So these are, some of important compliances that you need, at least become familiar with it. Okay, so I want to talk about important documents used by pen testers, and this is from legal perspective here. And here you can see the service level agreement, statement of work, master service agreement, non-disclosure agreement. Now, the fact is, pen testing involves several legal and contractual documents to define the scope, expectations, responsibilities, and confidentiality of the engagement. These documents ensure a clear understanding between the client and the service provider, minimizing risk and dispute. Therefore, we will discuss briefly about each one of them, to get an idea about these documents used by the pill tester. The first one, we have the service level agreement, SLA. This is a formal agreement between a client and the service provider that basically specifies specifies the services to be delivered, along with the expectation and responsibilities of both parties here, the client and the company. It serves as a benchmark for evaluating the quality and the performance of the service provided, and obviously accountability. So if you look here you could see some of the key elements commonly included. The first one here, we look at description of services. The SLA provides a clear and detailed description of the services to be delivered. In context of penetration testing, this may include like specifics, like testing scope, like what exactly you want to test, network, application, servers, what exactly, the methodologies and the timelines, how to measure services. Now, the agreement defines performance metrics or key performance indicators, KPI, to assess the service quality. For example, it may specify the time frame for delivering reports, response times to client inquiries, or adherence to testing methodology. Responsibility of parties here. Now, the SLA, outlines the roles and responsibility of both the client and the service provider. So, I mean, this is important because it ensures that both parties are aware of their obligation, such as providing access to system or delivering test results within the agreed time frame. Now, number 4, actions if the service level is not met. Okay, so this is another important item. What will happen if the service provider fails to meet the agreed upon standard? This may include penalty, financial compensation, or some other steps that needs to be addressed. And authorization here, the document defines who has the authority to approve or make decision regarding the engagement. This can include authorizing the scope of the penetration test, approving access to sensitive system, or signing off on the final report. So here you could see the purpose of SLA. It protects both the client and the service provider by ensuring transparency, managing expectations, and providing a clear mechanism for accountability. It basically reduces the risk of misunderstanding, between the two parties. Now, another document here, we have the statement of work, SOW. Now, this is very critical when it comes to pen testing engagement here, because it provides detailed information about the terms and specifics of the work to be performed, ensuring both the client and the service provider are aligned. Now, here you can see that there are some key concepts, so I'm going to talk briefly about each one of them. The first one is the scope of pen test. Well, you define exactly what system, network, or application to be tested. Deliverables here specify what the client will receive at the end of the engagement, like report, identified vulnerabilities, remediation recommendation, the price and the payment schedule, obviously. Detailing how the payment will be paid and how often. Change in management procedure. The SOW includes a process for handling changes to the scope or terms of engagement. This ensures that any modifications are agreed upon and documented. Project timeline, obviously, this is another important thing. This document specifies the duration of the project, the start and the end date, along with the milestones or deadlines for a specific delivery. Now, the location of where, is it going to be on-site or remotely or combination of both, liability disclaimers, so here you can see the purpose of the SOW provides a clear framework for the penetration testing engagement reducing the risk of misunderstanding and dispute. It basically helps ensure that the project is completed successfully and in alignment with the client's expectation here. Okay, so let's continue with the statement of work and discuss a few things. You could see it here on the screen here. Now, the statement of work outlines the parameters and activities involved in penetration testing project or job. Now, this document ensures that the scope is clearly defined, aligning with the client's expectation, with the tester responsibility. So let's talk about a few things here. I'm not gonna explain each one of these concepts because it's stuff already covered in ethical hacking. But when it comes to reconnaissance information gathering, you know, the agreement needs to specify the methods and the tools used to collect information about the target environment. Target allowed and off limits. Which one you can do the pin testing, which one you can. Scanning tools and processes here. You need to provide details about the tools and technique that will be used for scanning the target environment. Vulnerability discovery method. Okay. Here, where you need to outline the methods used to identify vulnerabilities. Like manual testing, automated scanning, or could be like specialized tools. Exploitation of vulnerabilities here define whether and to what extent identified vulnerabilities will be exploited to assess their potential impact. You know, there has to be certain limitation, by the way, and this is important here, to ensure no harm is caused to the production environment. Very important item here. Privilege escalation specify whether testers are authorized to attempt privilege escalation to simulate, a real-world attacker gaining higher level access within the environment here. Now, compliance testing standard, you know, it should be aligned, the penetration testing activities should be aligned with the relevant compliance standard. And I mean, again, that depends on your industry, whether you need to comply with PCI DSS or HIPAA or what. And the procedures for critical vulnerabilities discovery. Okay, so what is the protocol for immediately reporting critical vulnerabilities to the client? Because some of them require to take swift action to mitigate the risk. And finally, incident handling and notification here, the process for handling incident that may arise during testing, uh, like for example, including notifying the client about unexpected disruption or issues. Now, another document is called the Master Service Agreement, MSA. This is a high level, all encompassing document that outlines the general terms and conditions governing the relationship between the service provider and the client. It is optional, but highly beneficial for establishing a clear framework for collaboration and mitigating potential disputes between. Now, it's so you could see here it can combine SOW and SLA together here. It covers operational procedures, like again, the things I've discussed it before, like how services will be delivered, timelines, reporting, escalation, future SOWs, like set guidelines for creating and amending future project-specific SOWs, expectations, general payment, I already discussed that. The legal jurisdiction, dispute resolution, for example, which law governs the agreement and how disputes will be handled. And you got the warranties and the work standards here, states the standards of performance and the quality that the service provider must meet. And of course, liability disclaimer. And finally, purchase order processes, define how purchase orders are initiated, approved, and tracked. Okay, so let's talk about another important legal document, non-disclosure agreement, NDA. I'm sure some of you end up signing this, of course, depending on your job. Now, this is basically legal binding document, ensure confidentiality by protecting sensitive and proprietary information shared between parties, especially during engagement, like pen testing here. Now, I remember that this is legal and enforceable. The NDA is a formal contract enforceable in the court of law that outlines specific obligations for handling confidential information. This includes client system flaws and vulnerabilities. You know, like you want to ensure that any details about anything you discover as a pen tester, in terms of security weaknesses or flaws or, anything like that, cannot be disclosed or shared without explicit client permission. Protects client from damage caused by improper information disclosure. Okay, so the purpose here is to guard the client from reputational, financial, or operational damage that could result from leakage of sensitive finding. It prohibits you as a pen tester from using discovered information for competitive or malicious or unintended purposes. Now, okay, now I spoke about NDA from one perspective, but however, it's important to point out that you could have a mutual NDA. In some cases, both parties, you, the company, and your client, may share sensitive information, like penetration testers, a proprietary testing methodology, stuff like this could lead to a mutual NDA. Okay. Now, there could be some additional documents here, by the way, like data ownership and retention. This document outlines the ownership and retention of data generated during the penetration testing process. Permission to attack. The signed and authorized agreement outlines the potential attack scenarios and protects the penetration tester from legal liability arising from pen testing activity. And of course, you can have like third party authorization. There's no company without third party. So this document addresses the interaction and requirements necessary for penetration tester to conduct testing that may involve third-party services or systems, such as cloud hosting provider. Now, let's talk about the scoping. Scoping you find in every contract. And by now you should know that it's a process of defining and documenting the boundaries, activities, and the parameters of the pen test. It basically ensures that both you as a pen tester and your client have a clear understanding of what will be tested, how it will be tested, and the resources involved. So scoping is critical for ensuring the engagement is efficient, meets the client's needs, and complies with the legal and ethical guidelines. Okay, so there are many things that can be determined by many factors. The first one is organizational requirements. Okay, so uh, this plays a central role by defining the specific goals of the test. Now, standards and methodology. This here's where you need to provide a structure framework for conducting the test. Like, do you want to do OWASP guidelines? Well, yes. Well, why? Well, because it's focused on a web application. Do you want to do NIST, for example? Well, this is just a general penetration testing principle. Something like this you need to agree upon. Compliance requirement dictates the scope by addressing regulatory mandates like PCI DSS for payment system, HIPAA for health information, and so on. So I don't want to go through each one of them. Types of tests. Okay, so you want to do a black box test, or you want to do white box or gray box? Okay, this shapes the scope. The selected type affects the complexity and the resources required for the engagement. So this has to be set clearly. Now, rules of engagement here. Establish boundaries and ethical guidelines for testing. These rules specify allowed activity, such as whether exploitation or denial of service testing is permitted, and what protocols for handling critical findings or disruption. And you got the environmental consideration here. This influence the scope. You know, it's basically accounting for factors like whether testing occur in production or staging environment, the complexity of the organization network, and the presence of, legacy system, which is something you need to be extremely careful about it, or hardware. Now, these considerations help identify feasible targets and mitigation. And finally, identify the targets, which is I already mentioned this, which one you want to do the pen testing. Okay, is it network, application, or servers here? Okay, so I want to discuss MITRE ATT&CK Framework. Now, just to know, this is a comprehensive, globally accessible knowledge base that outlines adversaries' behavior, tactics, and techniques to compromise and exploit systems. It's developed by MITRE, and it's widely used in cybersecurity for understanding, detecting, and responding to threats. Now, it's managed federally funded research and development center in the field of cybersecurity, freely available service that offers cyber threat information to organization, used by FBI and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, and many, many companies. They publish also the common vulnerabilities and exposures CVE database for known. Now, okay, I can't go over each one of them, but I will give you the key components of this framework. Now, as I mentioned before, it outlines several things. One of them is the tactics, which means it represents a high level objectives that adversaries aim to achieve during an attack. Like, for example, initial access, privilege escalation, exfiltration, and impact. These describe why a particular activity is performed. The second one is the techniques. The focus will be how adversaries achieve their objectives, which is the tactics. Now, for example, to achieve a certain movement, adversary might use the remote desktop protocol (RDP). This is just an example here. Okay, techniques are further broken down into subcategories for greater, detail. The procedure document specific, real world examples of how adversaries execute the techniques. These are tied to known threat actors and campaigns. Now, data sources suggest where and how organization can collect data to detect adversarial behavior, like, should be done through logs, captured network traffic, analyze endpoint, or what? Telemetry. I meant to say adversary group. These are the group of threat actors, basically, their tools and associate techniques. So now this is just the website. It says attack.mitre.org. So please visit the site. If become familiar with it, read about it. It's very useful. Like for example, if I click active scanning here, that will take me to this link, which it says active scanning. The subcategories talks about the procedure examples, the mitigation, detection, and some other useful information that you need to become familiar with as a security professional. Okay, so let's talk about standards and methodology. And one of the first thing I want to talk about is OWASP. Now, OWASP is a non-profit organization dedicated to improving the security of the software, widely recognized in the cybersecurity industry for its contribution to web application security through tools, resources, and guidelines that help developers, organizations, and security professionals identify and mitigate vulnerabilities in the web application. Now, who can benefit from this? Well, developers can benefit from this. They gain access to best practices and tools for writing secure code. Security team use OWASP tools and resources for vulnerability assessment, penetration testing. Okay, and you as a student, for example, like if you're a student, you could learn how the penetration testing done against web applications. So it's highly recommended that you build up your own lab environment, and you download OWASP framework site, and then inside Kali Linux or outside Kali Linux or whatever you feel comfortable with, and you could build up this and you could do some testing and learning. Now, another one is the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. Uh, this is U.S. government agency under the Department of Commerce that develops and promotes standards, guidelines, and best practices for a wide range of industries, including cybersecurity, technology, and science. Now, they do play a critical role in enhancing the security and resilience of system networks and data. And if you look at here, one of the framework is cybersecurity framework, and it's and how it's divided into identification, protect, detect, respond, recover. So I strongly recommend that you go over it and try to understand it. Okay, it contains so much useful information. Now we have also other one is open source security testing methodology manual. Now, this methodology is comprehensive and structured framework for conducting security assessment. Now, it is published by this organization here, and it's divided into multiple operational security modules. Like for example, they talk about information security, focus on CIA of the data. They talk about process security as well, like assess policies and workflows to identify security gap. They discuss the physical security, wireless security, and the human security from social engineering perspective. Now, there's also another one. It's called the Penetration Testing Execution Standard, the PTES. Now, this is developed by a team of InfoSec experts organized into several sections. It's a framework that defines a structured approach to penetration testing, providing a set of best practices and guidelines for conducting comprehensive and consistent security assessment. Designed to ensure both the penetration tester and clients have a clear understanding of the process, expectation, and deliverables. Now, if you study ethical hacking or you took a course, you already familiar with the black box, which is testing, which is black box has, which is as a pen tester you have zero knowledge of the target test items, so you gather so basically you need to gather information about the target, which is simulate typical real world attacker. Now, if you want to do white box testing, your client will provide you with full knowledge of the target. Like network diagrams, IP address, OS versions, and so on. The gray box, it's in between, you know. Some information about the targets, but must discover remaining test details on your own as a pen tester. Now, let's talk about rules of engagement here. Now, rules of engagement in penetration testing are basically a set of agreed upon guidelines, boundaries, and expectations that define how the penetration test will be conducted. It serves as a formal agreement between you as a pen tester and your client, ensuring that the test is ethical, legally compliant, and aligned with your client's goals while minimizing risk to business operation, which is we discussed part of it. Now, like for example, okay, so once we do the rules of engagement, what factors we need to consider? Well, one of the types of tests being performed. Are we going to do scanning, probing, attack types, denial of service? Which test you're not allowed to touch? The timing, when the test can begin and end, times of the days allowed. Like for example, like some companies, they want you to do testing at after midnight. How to handle sensitive data when discovered or created. One of them is NDA. How do we communicate the project status and updates? How often to communicate? Are we going to have a meeting, milestones, reports, blah, blah, blah. And who should you contact in case of emergency? Or, and what will, like based on certain scenarios, like, you try to build up certain scenarios and who to contact. Now, continue with the factors considered handling of critical and sensitive vulnerabilities. Now, what action if prior compromise are discovered? Who is your target? Which we discussed many of this before. Client personnel involved in or aware of testing activities. And this is like for example, like if I want to do social engineering pen testing, do we need to tell our customers or your people in the company about this social engineering testing? You have to agree upon this. Like here, for example. And is passive reconnaissance activities allowed to gather information? Like, especially like if you want to do the black box testing. No. Okay, well, we have also another important thing here to consider as a pen tester, the environmental consideration here. So when you do this, it's essential to account for broader computing environment in which target systems operate. Now, since systems rarely function in isolation, obviously, like big companies, they have third parties, they have cloud services, understanding and respecting the overall context ensures that testing activities are effective and safe while minimizing risk to the organization. In this example here, when we talk about the big picture perspective, which simply means, you should not only focus, on individual system, but you should consider the interconnected environment, like if you have clouding environment here, like is it software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service? So testing must account for dependencies, integration, and shared resources that could be effective during assessment. Now, one of the rules of engagement for environment here and focus is that, the tools of the method limitations we're talking about here. Like, some environments restrict the use of specific tools. Like you cannot use denial of service tools in production, of course, or certain script in cloud environment. As a pen tester, you must respect these constraints to avoid unintentional disruption or legal consequences, of course. Now, also the testing method, like for example, like testing Windows. Testing may need to occur during non-peak hours, which is typical, to minimize the impact on production system. Cloud specific ROE, for example, using AWS or Azure often have strict guidelines for penetration testing in their environment. For instance, like certain activities like DDoS simulation may require explicit permission from them before you can do this. So it gets a bit challenging and complicated, but it's very important to look at each one of these. Now, another environmental consideration here we talk about the legal environment, encompasses, the local, regional, and national laws governing penetration testing activities. I mean, of course, this includes compliance with import and export restrictions such as encryption technologies, adherence to data storage and processing regulations, especially when it comes to European Union. I think it's called GDPR. As an organization, you must account for specific industry or government compliance requirements. Like for example, the HIPAA for healthcare, if you are in healthcare, PCI if you're in a payment system, and so on. And also, when it comes to an organization testing environment here, this is another crucial role. Now, testing in isolated or mirrored environments provide a safer alternative for exploring vulnerabilities while minimizing risk to live system. Obviously, that's the last thing you want to see, the live system goes down. However, in some cases, production system may need to be tested, which requires careful planning and adherence to agreed upon rules of engagement. Now, the communication environment includes establishing contact points across various departments, those executives, public relation, technical support, legal teams, any relevant third parties, So these communication rules should outline when and how tester report findings, particularly for critical vulnerabilities that was discovered by you, as well as the process for escalating issue or responding to inquiries. Now, defining target list, we already talked about this, that you have to specify the target, whether it's computers or networks or application or process, or if you want to do social engineering for the people, and also if it's third party, and so on. So all these you have to specify it clearly here. Now, when we talk about social engineering targets and methods, people are often the security's weakest link. We know this from social engineering incidents, that happen worldwide. So many types of social engineering may be used in pen tests, like phishing, spear phishing, and whaling, impersonation, shoulder surfing. Many other social engineering tactics and scenario exist there. So you probably have to agree with your company about which one you want to do. By the way, many companies, like every once in a while, they send like a phishing email to their employees, and if the employee messed up and click on the link, okay, within less than 24 hours, okay, trust me on this, okay, they will receive an email to do training, okay. Now we just reached the end of this module, the video lecture. You should be able to describe regulatory compliance, particularly the PCI, and you should have good understanding of the penetration testing legal document like the SLA, SOW, MSA, and NDA. Have good, and you should have good understanding of them, and something that I strongly recommend that you become familiar and you try to learn it and practice some of them. Those penetration testing standard and methodology like MITRE. Access the website, please watch it. And OWASP, download the OWASP and practice penetration testing against the web application. NIST, that's your reference to learn a lot of topics that found in the books, by the way, and this other penetration testing standards. And then you should be able to have a describe types of penetration testing assessment and define the rules of engagement for penetration testing. So finally, I want to thank you so much for watching this video lecture, and I hope you find it useful. If yes, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Again, thank you so much for watching.